people and to listen to your word and your praises and to worship you this morning. Um, thank you for all the beautiful things that will happen this morning. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.
Uh, some of you are a little bit more prepared for cooler weather than others. The others being myself. And that's because my things are still in boxes that are all my long sleeve shirts. And so sooner or later, I will be able to find those. But everybody that I see walk in with short sleeve shirt on, that makes me feel really good that I'm not the only one like this. And so, yes, thank you, Connor. I appreciate that commitment. Yeah. As we gather today, I was reflecting on, our church. This is I wish I could say we're a unique church, but in fact, I've been in Chinese churches it seemed like for forever, 40 something years. And we all tend to start late. It's just the way it is, and you can panic over it, you can get frustrated over it, or you can learn to live with it. I would encourage you, certainly, if we can, especially tonight and next week. We have different people that are going to be involved in our service. If you can try to be a little on time, it's a good thing. But, even as I make the comment about coming on time or not coming on time, I was also reflecting on my own personal life. And over the years, and I discovered this, I don't know, forever ago, I love to go into a church sanctuary when no one else is there and just quietly sit, pray, and reflect on the number of people who have come into that sanctuary and come to know Jesus. The number of sermons that have been preached, some good, some bad, some right on target, some not so much. But the ministers who have stood and preached and shared God's word with the people. The way that the Holy Spirit has reached into the lives of those people in the past in that environment. And when I'm sitting there quietly by myself, I'm able to do that. I would welcome any of you anytime you want to come into a quiet sanctuary. Just we'll find a way to get you into this room. But it's really a time to reflect on what God has done here and what he wants to continue to do and do in great ways. Today, prepare yourself, knowing me, and once you gradually do, you may be wishing I wasn't here so much. I really like new things. I like trying different things. But, this month it seems very reasonable that we would have a missionary come and share with us. And so today, your pastor told me that he couldn't be here, but you've got a missionary that is going to be here and been working for over 40 years with missions. And that's me. And so I'm going to be sharing with you in a few minutes. And this may be an intense and different type of service than we've had previously. I would like to share with you, and I won't give a time frame because I never follow the time very well. And you can't say anything because you're not great with time either. We all have our challenges in life. But I want to share for a few minutes kind of some generic things of where God has led me, some of the experiences of what I've had. I will try my best to avoid mentioning my wife too much because she's in here and would get really frustrated if I do. But then I want to give a time of question and answer and let you ask some questions about missions. And so then I'll respond to a few of those things. Now, I don't know how it'll all go, but we're going to have a good time doing it. But I would like for us to at least be sure we remember that this is all done in the spirit of worship. When we come together here on a Sunday morning, our goal is to meet God. It's not just to kick back and have a great time or listen to anybody or music or whatever. Our goal is to come in contact with the Lord. So even as I share continue to think through, where was the Lord in all that? And so that's all right. But I'm going to read a scripture. Kind of gives me a little context. Mark 14, verse 3. Now, most of you will read this and say, what in the world does that have to do with missions? But here we go. Mark 14, verse 3 says, and being in Bethany in the house of Simon the leper, as he sat at meat or to eat, there came a woman having an alabaster box of ointment of spikenard, very precious. And she broke it and she poured it on his head. And there were some that had indignation within themselves and said, why was this waste of the ointment made? Verse 5 says, for it might have been sold for more than 300 pence and have been given to the poor. And they muttered against the woman. And Jesus said, let her alone. Why are you troubling her? She has brought and has wrought a very good work in what she has done and done it for me. For you have the poor with you always. And whensoever you would, that could be done for them good, but me ye have not always with you. She hath done what she could. She has come aforehand to anoint my body to the burying. Verily I say unto you, whosoever or wheresoever this gospel shall be preached throughout the world, this also that she has done shall be spoken of for a memorial of her. That means she's going to be remembered for what she has done. The subject that I would have for today is that God uses ordinary people. Not always are the things that we do fully understood, but our heart and our motivation is important. God uses regular, run-of-the-mill kind of people in trying to reach out in ministry. And so today I want to remind you that missionaries are just average people who are committed to serving God. This month, the last few weeks, we've been watching a video each week, a different video about missionary work. And mainly it was talking about the International Mission Board, which, because we are connected with the Southern Baptist Convention, it's the International Mission Board is our primary mission organization. And through that organization, there are many ways to go overseas to serve. And I'm always kind of floored as I watch how people define the role of a missionary, or what a missionary is to be doing. And so many people think they know a lot about missions. Um, they have their perspective on missionary life usually based on maybe a short-term mission trip, or possibly just some people that they've heard speak at various times. But I want to give you an opportunity for us to interact a bit. I want to share a little bit about my call and my walk, but my walk has been pretty much through Southern Baptist and International Mission Board, so that's kind of what you're going to get. Now, I've also worked with another smaller parachurch mission organization, so if you need information on that, I can give you some input on that as well. Okay, back in the olden days, 1975, before some of you were ever born, but thank goodness in this room there are some that were also around. That makes me feel good. I had just finished seminary and finished it the first time and was ready to go overseas. And I went to the International Mission Board. I had applied, and their application process was a nightmare. And I've got to tell you about the application process because it was too much fun. They had what they called a missionary journeyman program, and they still have that program to this day. And I would encourage anyone in here under the age of 26 considering your future and open to getting a new experience. It's wonderful. But it's designed for people who are fresh out of college and for those that have been out for 1 or 2 years that want to go overseas. Well, I had been to seminary first, so that made me a little unique because I already had the master's degree in my pocket and was ready to go. And so I started applying through the International Mission Board, and they sent me their application form. And their application form was like 12 pages long. I've never seen anything like it. I felt like I was going to apply for university again. So I started looking at this form, but then I noticed what they did was they put like 3 questions on a page. And the question would say, based on your understanding of theology, do you believe that it's important for, and they'd give you this long question, and they'd stop. Then they give you this big space. Now, that was back when you hand wrote. We actually knew how to use our hands to write. I know some of you don't know that, but that's true. For those who use only texting, you can only use your thumbs. You're a different world completely. But I got the form, and I was trying to complete this form, and I looked at it, and I said, okay, so how do I feel about this? And so I wrote, good. And the next question, this long, 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 long question, I said, yes. And then I discovered on one page I had 3 words, yes, no, and good. And then I turned it over, and it was the same thing. Well, see, I had just completed my first time in seminary. I did a Master of Christian Education degree. Well, I had learned how to take tests, and I had learned how to make exams, and I had learned all kinds of things in there because that's part of what it was all about. And I'm looking at this form that was really poorly written. And I just determined, okay, I'll do it. So when I'd completed that 12-page application, I had probably put 25 words down. And then I wrote a little note at the bottom. I said, should you actually want any further detail on any of this, which I will be glad to provide, please ask me and let me know. I sent it in. And I was really struggling because I knew this will insult somebody somewhere. But I said, I'm a graduate of a Baptist seminary. They should know better. So I sent it in. About, I don't know, 2 weeks later, a week and a half, whatever, sometime later, I got it back in the mail. And someone had handwritten in, explain, give your idea at the end of each one of those questions. And so then I went back and did it the way that I knew they wanted it done. So that was one of those. Now that tells you a little bit about my character that I didn't tell you about before you asked me to come here as a pastor. And so I completed the form, and it was really fun for me. The International Mission Board, then, they have a kind of a time when they bring people together and they kind of interview you to talk with people. They've got a lot of students a lot of graduates that are wanting to go overseas to different places. And I went to a meeting that happened to be fairly near where I was living. And I think we had like 200 people show up for these interviews. And I knew that they were looking for around 80 people. And this was only one of about 4 locations in the United States that they were having these big meetings. They didn't invite everybody to come to those meetings. But they gave us opportunity to learn about different locations in the world where you would probably be working under a full-time missionary. Gave a description of what kind of work you would be doing, and just gave some real fun comments about what it would be like. And I read about one in Korea that was going to be working with university students, and it described the environment, what it was going to be like. And I thought, wow, that sounds good. Read about another one in somewhere in Africa was talking about going and working with high school students. Then read another one about going and working as a youth director in a church. Then read about, so they have all of these different opportunities. It's so exciting to think, my goodness, there are places I could actually be valuable. This is great. And I was just, like I say, just finishing seminary at that point. Which, anyway, you're supposed to put a choice 1, 2, and 3, and then they'll get back to you, which I put down choice 1 and choice 1B, 1A and 1B. I couldn't decide between 1 and 2. And I put down Korea and I put Hong Kong. And because I had completed my master's degree, they sent me to Hong Kong Baptist University. Started teaching at Hong Kong Baptist University, and I can still remember going in the class at the first day. And fine, you've gone to seminary, you've got a master's degree. Brethren, I assure you, attaining a master's degree and standing in front of 40 or 50 students is not the same. And I had not had really any experience teaching. And I can remember walking in the room the first day and the sound of the students standing up as their teacher walked in and thinking to myself, whoa, this is not America. My students in America don't do this. But these students did. And gradually, when I got in front of everybody, I looked at a student. I just, you kind of glance, you can't ignore them. They're all standing right in front of you. And I just kind of, oh, hi, how are you? And I moved my head just that much, and the whole group, boom, sat down. And then I realized, okay, so that's what I was supposed to do, but I really should have done it more like, well, okay. Well, I learned within a few weeks that that was only because that particular class were fresh graduates from high school that they were that way. Within 2 or 3 weeks, even university students over there don't stand for their teacher. So that was an interesting experience. But I had a wonderful time teaching at Hong Kong Baptist University. I got to stretch my wings. It was difficult. I had cultural challenges along the way. You know, when we think about a mission, a lot of people's missionary experience is limited to like 2 or 3 weeks going on a short-term mission trip. Mission trips provide a wonderful experience, but that's not missions. It's mission light. It's a good thing. It's valuable. But I had already been on some of those mission light trips. You know, when we go off to the reservations or something, and we do a 1 week thing or a 2 week thing, or you have someone come in, all of those are super valuable, can be just marvelous, but it's only a start. It's only a step. And I had been through those things. And so God was kind of taking me step by step. You know, I'm glad God didn't just pick me up and throw me in the deep end of the water and say, swim. You know, it was very much a slow process for me. And so through my church, I had been on short-term mission trips. Very, very helpful to me. But when I got over there and suddenly I was looking at 2 years, I can remember the first Thanksgiving. I got to the first Thanksgiving, and Thanksgiving was from 2 o'clock to 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Now, the reason was because I taught in the morning. I taught until 2 o'clock. Then there was a missionary that lived nearby, and I mean, I got in a taxi. I rode the taxi to their house, and I went in, and we had a turkey. We had a chicken, and so we had a chicken for her, and they had recorded a football game from the year before. And so the recorded football game the year before, and nobody remembered who won or lost. It didn't matter. You know, it's not like it's a kingdom issue as to who won a football game. Sorry, ASU, and sorry, you folks. We won't go into that. You might say something negative about Texas A&M or Dallas Baptist, but I wouldn't want to hear that. So anyway, so we finished our cake and our pie and our chicken, and I jumped back in the taxi and went back because I had a 4 o'clock class to teach. So my Thanksgiving was a 2-hour Thanksgiving. And then I began to really realize, gee, I'm really no longer in Kansas. That's a reference to, anyway, it doesn't matter. And so I realized I was no longer in America, in my world. But at Christmas, I can still remember, Christmas was tough. Because you're there by yourself, you're adjusting, having a great experience, meeting all kinds of new friends. You're pushing your skill set. You're watching God do some neat things. But I can still remember at Christmas, my family wasn't there. My friends weren't there, in the sense, long-term friends. And I just didn't know what to. And in America, often Christmas is a family time. And even in our church here, we can see the distinctions in our church because those who have come over from China, who don't have relatives here in our area, Christmas, what we experience here at the church is really important to them. We've become, for some of them, the only family they have. And that's our challenge, to be sure we show that love to them because they need that encouragement. But now for some of you who have lived here for 45 years, or your parents are from here, or anything, different game. And for you, Christmas is very much family related. And so we enjoy our time at church, but our time with our kids and our family is very, very much. And I was one of those kind of people. And so suddenly I'm in a place where I'm the outsider. I'm the one that's just come over from China. I'm the one that's got to figure out how I'm going to deal with this. But I can still remember going to church on that Sunday. It was amazing. Just like this week, we know that this next week, Larry and the choir are going to be singing, and we're going to have a men's chorus singing. And even tonight here, we're going to have the kids doing performances. Suddenly I realized God gave me a family here too. Even though I'm thousands of miles away from my upbringing, I can find family here, and it was important to me. Well, I continued in adjusting. Now, that was in Hong Kong. In Hong Kong, gradually I adjusted to the society, and I became a typical proud Hong Kong person. Um, I mean, I really did. I pretty hardcore Hong Kong for a long, long time. And so I served in Hong Kong 3 years. And at the end of 3 years, I completed my journeyman time, returned to the United States, went back to seminary again, studied some more, completed another degree, then returned as a single career missionary. Now, there weren't very many single career men in the world, just a handful of. There were a lot of single career women that were serving, but not a lot of men. And I went back to Hong Kong, then I went over to Taiwan, and then I didn't help the cause at all because I managed over there to meet a single woman. And I don't comment a lot about her because she'll kill me when I get home. Um, and so I was very fortunate. God had that prepared for me. And so while I was in Taiwan, I met Sue, and then went back to Hong Kong for a period of time. And so after about 4 year period of being single overseas, beyond my journeyman time, we married in 1983. And the IMB has policies that says you have to be an American citizen. Now, it used to bother me, but in truth, when you get overseas, there are some things that you can understand. Now, today that policy's changed a little bit. It's more you have to be, I think it's American or Canadian citizen, and so there's a little bit more flexibility in there. But still, they're recognizing you don't have some kind of a dependable citizenship on this side of the world, the governments can ever stand in. And when you begin to start seeing people and hearing about people that have gotten in trouble with governmental restrictions, or people who have actually been killed overseas, and some missionaries that I've known have been, um, you understand why the government connection gets into the picture a little bit more. And I can go into details some other time, but um, at any rate, between 1983 and 1988, we were in Kansas City, which is where we started Emmanuel Chinese Baptist Church, and I pastored that church and had a great experience with that. That's also where I was able to do some more. Again, I went back to seminary one more time. I'm a bit of a masochist when it comes to education, so I continue to do that. Or either that, or it means I didn't learn it the first time. I had to get it a second or third time for it to win in my head. The pictures, by the way, that are behind me are pictures primarily of work that I've done in China. I try not to look at the pictures, and so it's really a distraction back here because I'm seeing this one. It's a real temptation for me to talk about each one, but I'll try not to do that because I can make you as bored as can be if I go into those stories. But but after 1988, my wife and I went back to Asia. We went to Hong Kong, which, of course, I was going home. So immediately I jumped right back into work. And by that time, I was working in Cantonese and Mandarin and everything. My wife got to go to language school, so I really enjoyed that because I got to watch her suffer for a change. I had already suffered through that experience twice, once with Cantonese and once with Mandarin. And anyone that thinks you can learn Cantonese or Mandarin just by eating a pill is wrong. You can't find those pills. I've looked for that pharmacy for years, and it just doesn't exist. But in 1988, I went back, and this time I had done church planting while I was in the States. So I began teaching at the seminary in Hong Kong, and I taught in church planting, church growth. I was dealing primarily with practical theology courses. Great experience, but I was also starting another church. And so we did that for several years. But in 1997, I was called into a new kind of work. The International Mission Board asked me to do a global kind of work. So the thing I want to say to you, too, when you talk about being a missionary, it's like, with the IMB, it's like a giant umbrella with all of the different things that are possible. And I've worked as a teacher, a student worker. I've been able to work as a church planter. I've worked in administration. I just been in a seminary, a college, a high school, just different environments. One of the nice things of being able to work all under the umbrella of being an international missionary. And so in 1997, I started this new job, and my job was connected primarily with mainland China. It also included Taiwan and Hong Kong and Japan and Macau, but it was mainly the mainland. And I was dealing more than anything, trying, I thought, to work with the registered church. And we can talk about what registered church is some other time. The registered church, meaning it's the government church of China. The Three Self Church is sometimes called as well. Um, the other church would be the unregistered church or the house churches. So it's two different wings of God's work. But I began work there, and it was a wonderful experience. And then within a very short period of time, I began, as you can see on the pictures, I switched from the registered more into the house church network, what was going on. And that was due to some very difficult times in our lives. I will say to you, being a missionary is not a snap. It's not a simple thing. There are constantly stresses and challenges. I had worked very, very hard in Hong Kong to be a co-worker with the brothers and sisters there, an equal. Not above, not below, but just one of the guys. The and quite honestly, I still feel that way with the people that are there, and I love to see friends from Hong Kong, that kind of thing. But in the fall of 1997, after I was asked to come to Nanjing and to meet with some of the top leadership of the registered church and people at Amity Press. And when I got there, Amity Press is the one that prints all the Bibles. And they're printing Bibles in Chinese and in every other language you can imagine. It's managed to go into quite a money-making process there. And we can go into that discussion another time. But it was a good experience to go there. But what I found when I met the leadership at that level, they knew very, very much about how to use Christian vocabulary. But I would say that their heart and what they were using for vocabulary were not a perfect match. And I had another friend that went with me for the meeting that we had. We met for about 3 hours, 2.5, 3 hours. And both of us walked out saying, we doubt that they know the Lord. They knew the vocabulary. They could talk Christianity all day long. But did they really walk with Christ as Savior and Lord? And brother and sister, I'll say to you, that's all of our challenges. We all have that challenge to be careful. We never find ourselves depending on religion. Jesus died for us to walk with him, not that we'd be able to show that we're religious people. He wants us to have him as Savior and Lord, as our friend who guides us each and every day, the one who cares, the one who gave everything for us. But there are people who have Jesus in their head but do not have him in their heart. We have to be careful and always evaluate our own faith too. But it was a great experience, and I thank the International Mission Board for allowing me to serve. I served until just a few years back, and we took retirement. And when we took our retirement, then that gave us the opportunity to come back to this side of the world and start a different kind of ministry. We actually lived in Hong Kong, Taiwan, Macau, Malaysia, where else? Chongqing, Shanghai. Over the years, we've been in a lot of different places. But where we were was never important in the sense of whether it was comfortable or clean or nice. The issue is that where God wanted us. So we're very happy now to be here. And I'm not going to wrap it up there. I'm going to allow you to ask me a question. What do you know about mission, or what would you like to hear just to better understand what missionaries do and what we're about, or what's going on even with the International Mission Board today? Please use your creativity. Come up with at least a couple of questions so it gives me a little face, okay? Yes? Okay, how am I supported financially? That's a very good question. And we need to understand it as a church, because you've been giving money to the International Mission Board Lottie Moon Christmas offering. And that offering makes up a very heavy amount of what the salaries are that send missionaries and the work that we do overseas. So that money's vital for us being able to do the work. Um, a lot of mission organizations, their way of getting their funding is to go around to different churches. They do a little spiel about missions, and then they ask you to continue to give them financial support on a monthly basis or something like that. Nothing evil about that, nothing wrong about it. But I do want you to understand with the International Mission Board, I really want you to understand what we do, what some of the jobs are, because there are organizations where people will do that and they go around, and these so-called faith mission organizations, sometimes I bump into people they're not doing the most work in the world. They're doing kind of ministries that you kind of think that local people could be doing. And I can give you a very strong example on that at a later time, but I want to answer your question first. Financially, the salary of the missionary comes from the cooperative program. The cooperative program is part of the Southern Baptist Convention work. What we do when we give money to Lottie Moon is special, though. Lottie Moon Christmas offering, all of that money goes specifically to overseas missionary service. So if we give $12,000 from our church, and a little bitty church over here, really small, is only able to give $200. But then you go and you look at Phoenix, the big church over there, and they give $35,000. So you put 35 and 12 and 200. Now, which one sent the missionary? They all did. I belong to all of them. So if I have that church of $200 giving, ask me to come and share with them about Christ, I will. And I'll share with them at the same time about missions. And I will tell them, thank you for supporting missions, because they don't have the same resource base. But when you go into the one that gives a whole bunch, I'll go and share with them too. But I'm not going to say, you guys have value, you guys don't. They're all my boss. They're all the ones that support us to go. And so Lottie Moon, big time, very important. Now, beyond Lottie Moon, cooperative program, each month, we often churches will give a designated amount of money from their giving to support the cooperative program. And the cooperative program, again, is an umbrella. And they have home missions work. They have local missions work. And they have overseas. So let's say that each month our church gave $1,000 to that. I'm just making a number up. Don't hold me to that. And especially if Lorraine's in here, because she'll murder me for saying that. Anyway, she would never do that. But the point is, the umbrella allows the money to go to different directions. And so maybe $100 goes here and $100 goes there. But that money also is very, very important, because Lottie Moon doesn't cover everything. It can't that quickly, that intensely, but it covers an awful lot. So my salary came from churches. And you guys are the name of the game. It's the giving from churches that support the mission. Yes, sir. Mm, mm. Yep. Okay. Talk about our administrative structure very briefly. We have from Richmond, Virginia, as our home base. And in Richmond, that's, we get to where we actually joke about it and talk about, well, back home in Richmond, and none of us have ever lived in Richmond in our lives, but we do know that's our foundation is back there. That's where the main offices are located. They do come up with some philosophical and strategic directions. For example, with us here, with the for missionaries serving overseas, our value is always around church planting, church growth, discipleship. We want to train. We want to have. We do things with Christian education, and with seminaries and with universities for outreach. Those kinds of things are all a part of what we do. Um, there are things that we don't necessarily do. And I can still remember a hard decision a number of years ago was related to an orphanage. And we bumped into that particular topic. And the problem was we had a lot of resources going into this very small orphanage. And we had to just ask the question, is there a way of us hiring locals to manage that orphanage instead of us having local Christians at a better rate than, and of course it was like a tenth of what we were spending on the missionaries that were involved with it. And so it was, but for the missionary that was involved there emotionally, oh my goodness, trying to supervise that person was a nightmare because they've got all their rationale for why they need to stay and they love the kids and they do. It's not easy when you've got a bigger picture and you've got a responsibility to accomplish a certain task. But we felt like, or we feel like, as a mission organization, you have to have some accountability for doing a work that is understood and is valuable to the kingdom, and our churches can grasp what we're trying to do. So it's a little bit of a challenge, but as far as who makes the call, Richmond puts down the groundwork, and they're the ones that, and when I say that, that comes from a board of directors. And the board of directors are made up of pastors primarily. But it's made, and they come together and they discuss what should missions be doing today. Now, part of the problem with that is sometimes they have a real full grasp of what missiology is or what missions is about. Sometimes all they are is a good old boy pastor, and they do great back home in their little church, but they have no understanding of missions. And so it's really a challenge to be sure you balance that well, because they're going to be putting out the expectations for the bigger picture. And then you go to East Asia, and East Asia may cover many countries. And within that area, we have a local regional director, and we have some, and the titles of these positions change all the time. And you have some people that are doing supervision and strategic work within that. And so then they become the ones that are more of the implementers of strategic thinking from that main body. So it's sort of a trickle-down thing. Then you go back to the local places. We had what we called strategy coordinators. Today the name has changed, but it means that, for example, if you came to my city, the city of Phoenix, and I would come here, and the first thing I'd want to do is start networking with the other churches. And I probably would surprise you in that my networking would go beyond Baptist churches. Because, the Mennonites and the Methodists and other Christian organizations are not my enemy. Satan is my enemy. And I have to be careful there. And it's amazing how often denominations will cut themselves off from a great blessing of working with people of other denominations. And anyway, so what we would do is I'd come to a city like this. I would go around. First group, now you're still prioritized. My first group would be Baptist. But then I would maybe look at Evangelical Free, or look at maybe the Alliance, or look at some other groups that are similar to us theologically, and I would try to meet with them and find out what are their goals, what are they wanting to accomplish. But what I'm trying to do with them is to ask them, how are we going to reach the city of Phoenix for Christ? What is our strategy? Are we thinking about church planting? Are we trying to reach out as a group? Do we have meetings that help us to do these things in a coordinated way? We try to function, and so that's something that we do in a more local. And so we have these strategy coordinators in cities all over the world, all over the world. And their responsibility is to develop a broader group of co-workers. Right now, the hot to trot term with the International Mission Board is limitless, and the term limitless means finding a way to get our churches to send their own people. But send them, and then send them overseas and let them work under these kind of strategy coordinators. So to say to someone in Macau, Marilyn Hing or whomever, Marilyn, we've got a team of 8 people that are coming. They're willing to come for 2 weeks. If you can find a way to use us and use us well, we want to come and do the ministry that you will help us to, allow us to do. And so we work with someone that's there so that after 2 weeks or after 10 days or after 5 days, when we leave, that person has gained a bit of credibility in the community as being a person of resources, someone who can bring in sources that are of value. Plus, whatever ministry we did while we were there, hopefully will really have been a benefit to her and the people that are there. So I'm using her only as an example, but there are strategy coordinators all over the world in all kinds of countries. And we try to work with them and allow them to make the ground level decisions as long as it supports the broader goals of evangelism and outreach in the name of Christ. Yes, ma'am. For the missionary's family. The definition of the word family is a bit of a challenge here. I am assuming you're kind of thinking like if it was a husband and wife and 2 kids or something. Okay, that kind of family. All right, got it. In our case, it was my wife and our 3 sons. Um, you know, okay, I've got to give this example. It's free, so I'll go quick. Robert. Robert is now 32 and working on a Master of Divinity degree. So in the end, he ended up being okay. But here's the story. Here's the story. In the midst of all of my work, I was also a church planner, and I was teaching church planning, this kind of stuff. And we had a church called Sunhamo, New Hope Baptist Church. And one day, one of the sisters, at 22, 23 years old, came up to me and she said, Pastor, we need to talk to you a minute. I said, sure, And they said, your son. Well, our son, this is funny too. Our son was going to a local school, and Robert's grown up speaking Cantonese forever. Well, for anybody that's Cantonese speaking in this room, you will understand. Cantonese has more dirty language than any of the rest of the Chinese stuff. Okay. So Robert came in, and they said. And so I knew Robert was going to this school, but he's going to this school called Puijing. And Puijing's a famous school. It's a Baptist school, all that. But even though it's a Baptist school, in truth, the number of Christian kids or Christian parents and that kind of thing, very low. They go there because it's a well-known school. And anyway, these couple of church members, these youngsters, they came and they said, wow, said, Robert knows words we don't know. Said his mouth is woo. And I can't remember how they said that in Cantonese, but it wasn't woo, but it was there. And I picked it up quickly. And so I said, and what do we need to do? And they said, well, do you need to talk? I said, you're saying words I don't know. I said, I'm a missionary. All I learned are the good words. I don't learn the bad words. I said, I wouldn't even know it if he said it to me. I said, but if you've heard him saying this stuff, please go ahead and teach him. He said, it's okay. I said, it's vital, please. So when you talk about the family thing, it's a challenge at times because when you talk about what are the expectations, my expectations, my son wouldn't use that kind of language. I really wish he would use good language. Well, eventually, from what I understand now in his MDiv program, he doesn't use that anymore. But back in history, it was there. And so, the kids growing up overseas, the goal of the mom is to, she tends to give more time than I did to the kids when they were in school. A lot of times, as far as the wife is concerned, they kind of find their own responsibilities. Sometimes they're teachers and nurses, and they have their own expertise area as well. Some have been ones that basically stayed at home, and they were piano teachers a lot. That was sort of an extra way of helping. Some worked in the churches on the side, but the kids were just like any other little kids. They grow up, and they have all kinds of experiences. The challenge, though, with kids overseas is language and adjustment and adaptation. They do not learn the local language just because they were born there. It still only happens with intention. For my wife and I, we knew from the very beginning, our goal was that our children would speak the local language. And so we put them in local schools. But I can still remember the first day we tried that. The teacher, we happened to have a kindergarten teacher that said she understood that they would get the language. But the principal didn't get it. Her education background apparently was not as strong. She just said, oh, but he doesn't understand. And the kindergarten teacher said, I'll take him in my class. And 3 months later, he was just doing fine. But it took him a little while. It was like a computer. It took a little time to download. But once he got it in there, he was okay. And but it was invaluable because some MKs, missionary kids, live overseas without the language, and they kind of live in a bubble. They have to function staying in Western circles and going to certain places where people speak English. They go to the English language Baptist church on Sunday because they can't understand. Look, our kids would die going to the English language. I mean, they enjoy going to just anywhere and having friends everywhere. So that, yeah, it does take work, but it's worth it in the end. And I'm very much aware in the United States, we get Asians here that will say, "Oh, I wish I'd have learned it." Well, yeah, but it's not, your environment was not. Over there, I mean, my kids learning Cantonese, they had it only everywhere to practice because it was all around them. There was no choice. Over here, it's a little bit more of a challenge to try to learn a second language that way. Anyway, any other, one more question? Anybody? And then there were none. Okay. Um, I want to give you one quick story and I'll stop. Had a friend of mine come to China, and I haven't talked about China, would love to have done that today, but just ran out of time, which I will. Missions, give me about 5 hours, we might get marginally started. Um, but I had a friend of mine come to China a number of years ago. We were living in what was called Seihap Yuan. It's just an old Chinese farmhouse, kind of a square thing, really rustic, backward, all that kind of thing. And we had gone there, we're doing training, and I could still remember going in going in the room that I was staying in. Really thankful that the weather was much like this city is usually, in that it didn't rain. Not the last night it did, of course, but there was a hole right above my bed in the roof. It was a straw roof, and the hole was probably, I don't know, maybe a 2 foot by 2 foot. It was a pretty good sized hole. I was really thankful it didn't rain then, but I could look up and see the stars. It was just a very interesting thing. But because this old farmhouse was out in the middle of nowhere, the government wouldn't bother it. So we found a place where we could go for this training. Well, it was a house church group, and it was technically not supposed to be being done. And so we were there, we were meeting, we had a great experience with that. But I gradually had a friend that had been in Taiwan teaching at the Baptist Seminary in Taiwan. His name is Leroy Hogue. And Leroy now is 80, I guess. But at the time, he was 70, 80 something now. He was 70 at the time. And he and his wife came to China, having retired from teaching at the Taiwan Baptist Seminary. He'd come back to the United States, been living here, and I asked him to come, and he came. And I explained to him, I said, "Now, Leroy, I want you to come, and I want you to have a great experience with these people. These brothers and sisters love the Lord, and they're here to learn." But we had about 40 people that were together. They went inside this thing, and I said, "They'll give you a little room for you specifically, but they're all sleeping on mats just all over everywhere, and they're going to be here for months. And so you're just right in the middle of this thing." But I said, "It'll be a wonderful experience, I believe. I believe God's got you here for a purpose." Well, he came in and he taught them an Old Testament class while he was there for about 10 days. And had well, maybe it was 7 days, but at any rate, it was a marvelous experience for him. Finished up his teaching. Now, you've got to understand, this group of people, they're the most loving people in the world. But one of the things they did to welcome he and his wife, remember, we're not talking about youth coming into this thing. For he and his wife, when they came, they realized that they were going to be having this older couple, and they went out and they bought them one of those high-class toilets that folds open and has the hole in the middle. Boy, high-class stuff. Because, again, the toilet facilities there were just a hole in the ground. But they wanted to give them a high-class opportunity there. But the point was, it was out of the goodness of their heart and out of the resources that they had. And so this couple was there for that week. And I knew, when it came to taking a shower or taking a bath, that was done with a wet rag. And that was all you had. And so it was a challenging experience. I had told him, though, before he went, that once he finished the experience, he had to schedule, before he ever came, extra 2 days to stay in a hotel. And he didn't understand why. But later, after he came back to the United States, he said, now I understand. And I really appreciated the last 2 days very, very much. The reason was I knew what all he would go through while he was with them for 7 or 8 days or however many it was. And he told me, he said, I went into the hotel and I took a shower. And about 20 minutes later, I went back and took another shower. And I understood that because I knew what it was like to be in a place where just the little things are the things that meant so much. But he told me also, he said, now don't misunderstand. I taught for 30-something years at the seminary in Taiwan. And I'm not at all sure that this may have been the best experience in ministry I've had in my entire life. He wasn't looking for comfort. He wasn't looking for prestige. He wasn't going to build his reputation for anything. It was just an opportunity to serve the Lord. Those are some of the kinds of people that serve as missionaries. There are some really, really good ones out there. And they do need our support. They need to know that we care about them. They need our prayer support very, very much. So today, I come to you saying what we've been talking about with Lottie Moon and the International Mission Board and any mission organization that's going and serving. These are people who have made a commitment. And I want to say to you, Missionary Journeyman Program 2-year changed my life. Just like going on short-term mission trips. Short-term mission trip changed my life and got me ready to go as a 2-year missionary. But that 2 years became a 3rd year and then became a lifetime. Follow God as He leads and He guides. Let's pray. Father God, we come to you today as brothers and sisters